Have you been doom scrolling? Well, stop it. Hi, I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle now. And Bill, doom scrolling is the term that has been coined to describe people who get onto social media like Twitter or Facebook or elsewhere on the internet and just can't stop scrolling through the news feed, primarily of things that really bother them. And now there are psychologists and psychiatrists saying that this is a serious mental health condition, this doom scrolling side effects that can cause anxiety, depression, fatigue, sleeplessness. Bill, it's interesting because on the one hand, we say that you can't have the kind of republic that we do without an informed voter base. And on the other hand, if you really try to inform yourself as a voter, you may wind up fondling a revolver. What do you make of this, Bill?
Well, not just fondling a revolver and not just, aiming it at yourself either. You might want to add homicidal rage to the list of symptoms. The internet, I have no doubt, having watched it from pretty much from the beginning, I think I probably logged on first time in 94 or something, is at the same time the greatest miracle in terms of human knowledge and at the same time perhaps the most dangerous thing that we've ever invented because of what it does to people emotionally and psychologically. My brother Evan, who I disagree with on some political issues, told me that he got off of Facebook because he realized that Facebook was constantly putting things in front of him that made him angry. Not just things that he was interested in, but things that made him angry. And since it made him angry, he would click on it and he'd be on longer, which is what they want in terms of ads. Scott, the social proof, this business of caring about what other people think about you is more important than your core beliefs. It's been proven again and again and again, not just in the real world, but experimentally, that most people, the huge majority of people, will go along and do what other people are doing rather than what they believe in because they don't want to stand out. And so social media magnifies this psychological effect by orders of magnitude. And this is why we find ourselves imprisoned and not saying what's on our mind because we so greatly fear what mobs and multitudes of people will either say about us, or in this cases now, come to our house and do about it. So yeah, it's a real problem, and I don't know what to do about it.
It's an interesting kind of addiction because at least superficially or at first, if you drink or do drugs or things like that, you're doing so because it makes you feel good, at least at first. But this is quite the opposite. You're doing something that right away makes you feel bad. It always, I kind of used to be sarcastically joke about amusement parks where people would actually pay to go in and feel scared to death and sick. And I was like, what kind of people do this? I want you to throw me around in the air until I feel like I'm about to puke and I'm scared that I'm going to die. Here's $40.
Yeah, how do you explain an amusement park ride or a roller coaster to an alien species, What do you basically say to them? You say, we're descended from arboreal ancestors, and there's a primal thrill that we get about falling. It's just built into us. Falling was dying, and so the ones of us that were good at avoiding falling managed to survive and pass on those genes, and those of us that weren't so afraid of falling fell, and they're not with us anymore. How do you explain to an intelligent extraterrestrial race that we really enjoy putting ourselves in situations where we're absolutely terrified? You can make the same case for horror movies or anything else. And what you get down to is, and I suspect that this is a significant factor of the doom scrolling, what you get down to is adrenaline has a powerful draw, more on some people than others. And I would imagine that doom scrolling is kind of almost a low grade kind of adrenaline addiction. You feel adrenalized when you get angry. And there are some people who are really addicted to this. Some people take enormous risks in order to get that adrenaline rush. I've done things that many people think are dangerous. I've flown experimental planes and done some aerobatics, but I never did it for the adrenaline rush. When I got an adrenaline rush, I was exceedingly uncomfortable. My entire purpose was to make sure I didn't get an adrenaline rush because I wanted to, come home. But I think the adrenaline rush has got a lot to do with it. Without question, what it's doing is it is taking the entire population of the planet and moving it emotionally, mentally, spiritually, intellectually down narrower and narrower corridors. Kind of reminds me of those forced perspective things where you see a door and you walk towards it and you find out the door's like this big. It's almost like we're getting pushed ever tighter into lanes that we really shouldn't be in, and that we wouldn't be in if we got this information from other human beings.
And yet there is not the stigma on this behavior, this doom scrolling behavior, that there is, for example, on spending a large amount of time on pornography on the internet.
No.
And yet, in a sense, both are eliciting a similar response. There is a vicarious thrill that comes both from what one might view as titillating and one might view as terrifying, or misery-inducing or fear-inducing. Can you see at some point in the future people starting to make that connection and saying, you know what? If you wouldn't do porn on the internet or brag about it anyway, why would you scroll through news feeds?
It hasn't been my observation that that porn on the internet has been decreasing due to people being aware of it being bad for them.
But there still is the social stigma, though. It's not something that people, walk around.
There is a social stigma. There's a social stigma to it at the Thanksgiving dinner table, but not online. It's just something that just pretty much everybody is just constantly just referencing, and not the. I saw an example of this morning, as a matter of fact, on a discussion group. The fact of it is that it is dangerous for the reason that all addictive things are dangerous, including alcohol and drugs, cigarettes, all of it. What happens is you get a short-term boost,
dopamine hit,
a pleasure boost. Yeah, you get a hit, dopamine hit or endorphins or whatever, and once that wears off, you generally have to go further in order to get the same level of hit. And in the case of pornography or doom scrolling, smoking, drinking too much, all of this stuff, you're consciously aware of the fact that you're destroying your body or your soul or both or whatever. But the definition of addiction is the inability to control that. There are people out there, I happen to be one of them, although God knows I have a bunch of other problems. There are people out there who are social drinkers, and I'm one of them. I can go out and have 2 or 3 drinks with friends, and that's it. And I don't have to drink more, and I don't drink the next day, and I don't go out and buy drinks for myself. It's fortunate in that regard. Some people are not able to do that. And so this is undoubtedly a form of addiction. It's an adrenaline addiction, and it is generating an insane population. Insane. And I saw just earlier today a video of a woman who was driving past some Trump supporters. She rolled down her window, came out of the window of the car, screaming and yelling at the top of her lungs and shooting birds at the people. And she took her foot off the gas and ran right into the back of the car in front of her, I mean, that kind of reaction is not a normal reaction. I see things all the time that upset me and make me angry, but I don't lose my mind over it like that. I get hot when I'm talking about it on the show sometimes, but that's not uncontrolled, and that's not something that is just spontaneously generated by seeing a Biden sign or something. So, yeah, it's extremely dangerous. The internet is making us all crazy, Scott, and it's making us all crazy faster. And the worst of it is that there are people who are arranging this, and that's the only word for it, because if Facebook or YouTube or whatever is writing algorithms that put things in front of you that they are betting you're going to watch not because you want to or because it makes you happy, but because it makes you angry, then we're in some trouble. And on that thought, by the way, it does make you wonder what our country would look like if somehow or another through legal action, these companies were forced to provide follow-up videos or tweets or whatever, or links that made you feel happier rather than sadder or more furious. Wouldn't that be an interesting social experiment?
So, final question here. This story comes to us, by the way, from the CBS affiliate in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA.
I hate those guys. That station is just... Every time I see those guys, they got some kind of liberal bullcrap going on. So I don't care what you have to say about this Philadelphia station. I already know all I need to know about those guys.
Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
and as a Pennsylvania
the whole state of
native.
Pennsylvania, does that matter? They're just all
Pittsburgh is completely different than Philadelphia. Just ask anybody from either place.
I hate them all equally.
So anyway, they are quoting a psychiatrist from the University of Pittsburgh in their backyard there, who says that there are a couple of things that you can do if you've got this doom scrolling habit. Number one is kind of identify your triggers, identify the things that set you off. Number two is to phase those out. And number three is to keep a social media schedule. And so, this is a psychiatrist recommending how you deal with this. But Bill, I guess the question I have is, why not just drop it all together? Is it really that precious that you need to scroll through this nastiness? Why not just end it?
This is going to come across as a huge surprise to many of our long-term listeners here, but I've been known to get a little hot-headed every now and then. And
is there video evidence of this anywhere that we could find on the internet?
No, there's no video evidence. I do it usually off camera after the shows are over. But I realized this about me early, and I realized that when I started getting into the comments in the days of the eject blog, it was just making me miserable, so I stopped doing that. I never ever touched Twitter. I think I'm set up to automatically tweet Facebook posts, but I don't go near Twitter for the simple reason that I'm fully aware that I would write things that I would enormously regret later. And this reminds me of what Stonewall Jackson said about scotch. He said, would you like some scotch? He said, no, thank you. Don't you like it, General? No, I like it very much. And so you could, the best way to do it is just to stop. And I know a lot of people who stopped. Steve Green stopped. You've stopped. I just put it away. But ultimately, Scott, here's the thing. And I saw this phenomenon at least 10 years ago. More than that. I think one of the very first shows we did on Trifecta back at PJTV was about young kids rage quitting from video games. They're playing first-person shooters, which means that they're completely adrenalized. Their biology is convinced that they're engaged in combat, and that all of those aggressive instincts that have kept us alive and still keep us alive with soldiers and so on are ramped up inside these kids. But the critical difference is that they're not getting any exercise. So those adrenaline levels build up. And instead of burning that adrenaline off in a sprint, to get your hands around that other guy's throat, it doesn't get burned off. In fact, it gets exaggerated, because now you're pumping down energy drinks and eating, a bunch of sugar and stuff. And so you see these young kids, almost exclusively male, but that makes sense. 10, 12, 13 years old, smashing things, bursting. They're just completely out of control with rage. Rage quit is a term. And that decoupling of the threat mechanism and the aggression mechanism in our brains, which has served us well, decoupling that from the physical exertion required means that these levels of adrenaline and anger and hatred just really, really, really build up. And my experience with the one fight I've been in my entire life was that after I fought this guy, my fear of him and my loathing of him both went down enormously. And same for him. And so we see comments on these shows, as you pointed out in the spam filter, the things that are said about you and me and other people. You would never say that to a person in their face. Number one, because they'd smack you back. And number two, because if you said that to an actual person, you'd realize that you're dealing with a real person and not just this idea that's implanted to drive you to fits of homicidal rage on the parts of tech companies that have no compunction whatsoever about ripping the society apart in order to expand their money and their control.
In fact, it's their business plan.
That's exactly
ladies and
right.
gentlemen, we are grateful to the members at BillWhittle.com who not only watch these programs, but make it possible for us to have serious discussions about the news of the day in the context of time-tested principles for years now. We just this week shot the 500th episode of Bill Whittle Now. We've done many, many episodes of Right Angle, and it's all because of those folks who provide the juice to make this happen. We're grateful for their contribution and the content they create behind the veil, so to speak, in the members-only blog at BillWhittle.com. If you'd like to find a group of friends that can help talk you through this whole process, you might want to join us by clicking that big green Become a Member button at BillWhittle.com. For Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.